Welcome to this video presentation in the series Being Transgender, in which we look at different aspects of this condition to help people better understand it. My name is Steph Polak, and in this particular video I will be looking at the many issues that transgender people are currently facing, what these actually are and the consequences these have. And in this first part, I will look at the issues surrounding social understanding and acceptance. It should be noted, this video contains references to suicidality, self-harm, hate, abuse and violence, and is specific to the UK in the 2020s. So what are the issues faced by transgender people today? Well, if you surveyed the general public, you'd probably find most would say that bathrooms and pronouns are what trans people are most concerned about. Gender-neutral toilets and being referred to by strange pronouns like they and them. The truth is, though, that while having somewhere to pee in safety and being referred to correctly are important, as issues, these come well down the list of those actually faced by trans folks. These actual issues fall into four main areas. The first is with the nature of the medical services. The second is with officialdom, and especially the law and the aptness of and protections provided by this. Thirdly, there are the issues we all have that are part of our day-to-day lives. And finally, there is social understanding and acceptance. What society knows about trans folks, and therefore how it views and treats them. It is the last area that I will be looking at in this particular video. When we look at social understanding and acceptance, we can identify a number of distinct groups that are important to trans folks. The general public, family, friends and partners, those in positions of importance, those who abuse and are violent towards trans folks, those currently involved in an anti-trans campaign, and then the transgender community itself. Each of these has different views, understanding and interactions with transgender individuals. However, before looking at each, we need to set the base for understanding that being transgender is biological in nature and is not an ideology or acquired belief. That means you are born transgender and it is not something you come to believe you are or can become or choose. This has been covered in other videos in this series, and if you are unsure of this, do please watch these videos. So what of the general public, the people we encounter every day of our lives? These, it is fair to say, know very little about being transgender, its nature, its impact on an individual, the actual treatment processes, the laws, the real issues and so on, and therefore have considerable misunderstanding. However, most people know someone who is transgender, and despite their lack of understanding, are generally accepting or at least tolerant of them. This is particularly true of the younger generations, who are better informed and less ideologically indoctrinated. But there are still many prejudiced views and general misunderstandings that work against trans folks. Aside from the stereotypical weirdo hairy men in dresses and similar that is oft used to demonize, the combining of trans T and intersex I with LGB is something of a double-edged sword. While there is strength in numbers, crossover and some common issues, this amalgamation leads to a general public belief that they are all the same thing, even with those who you'd expect to know better. In short, being trans is considered to be about who you fancy, your sexuality, and that LGBTQI+ should therefore be treated as one and the same, when in fact they are very, very different. Trying subsequently to get people to correctly understand transgender folks and their specific nature and issues is difficult. People tend to push back on demands for understanding and acceptance, especially for claims that they often consider fallacious. People also don't like trans politics being pushed down their throats, especially when they don't believe it is relevant to them, and have therefore taken little note of the huge coverage transgender matters has received in recent times. As has always been the case, clarity, care and patience are required. The right to educate and establish better understanding and acceptance must be earned. But public understanding and opinion is, though, hugely important. As history has repeatedly shown, public ignorance, misunderstanding, prejudice, and ambivalence are enablers for those with unshakable ideologies that deny nature and seek to harm trans folks. Getting the public to understand that their beliefs and claims are fabricated falsehoods is essential to countering them. This is achieved by all in the community constantly pushing simple, clear messages. Gender is not the same as sex or sexuality. Being transgender is a natural neurobiological condition, not a choice or ideology, that is very challenging to live with and deal with. Alongside this, individuation, that is, putting a human face on trans people and showing them as everyday folks contributing to society, is the standard approach to countering false prejudice and demonization. And finally, it has to be appreciated that improving public understanding will always be an evolutionary, generation by generation process that takes time. As the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. The importance of friends, family and partners to trans folks hardly needs stating. But just as with the general public, this group also nearly always has little understanding about being trans, at least initially. So when someone starts questioning their gender and coming out as trans, the reaction of those in this group is often one of shock, confusion and fear. Not only does it challenge their judgment and beliefs, but as they have the most to lose, so they are fearful not only about what the future holds, but what others may think. As a result, denial, mistreatment and rejection are common, especially where strong ideological beliefs are held. There is a lot of learning and adjustment that these folks need to make, including possibly grieving, and that requires time and patience. Even then, relationship breakdown is common as the trans person becomes unable to meet a close partner's needs. So, while trans folks need acceptance, understanding and support from their friends, family and partners, what they commonly experience is denial, rejection and ejection, with ignorance and misunderstanding at the root of this. This group, therefore, not only needs extensive education, but also expert support, because research has shown that trans folks who receive love and support thrive, while denial and rejection simply deepens mental health issues and suicidality that can be fatal. This is demonstrated by the tragic example of Leila Alcorn, a transgender teenager whose parents had extreme religious beliefs. She received nothing but denial and mistreatment. Locked away, cut off from communicating with the outside world, and subjected to conversion therapy, she committed suicide by walking out in front of a truck on a highway. Her subsequent social media posts, timed to be published after her death, explained all, though her parents still refused to accept her. As tragic as this is, it is far from a one-off example, and happens all too often. There is also a group of individuals who are in positions where their views, voices, decisions and actions not only significantly influence public opinion, but directly affect the lives of transgender folks. These include politicians, those in charge of medical services, the media, those in justice and rights organisations, religious leaders, those in uniformed services, and of course, those who are bosses. Although one would imagine these would be well informed on transgender matters, they are, in fact, almost always as ignorant on these as the rest of the general public. This group's views, and therefore what they say, and their decisions and actions, are based on what they have been or are told, either through teaching or lobbying. However, transgender matters are generally only a very small part of their overall responsibilities, so this group looks, in the limited time available, to others, especially those who are prominent, for quick and easily absorbed advice and information. This makes media relations and lobbying hugely important because it determines who these folks consult. Those who are visible and with views that broadly align with their own, be they political, religious and so on, are those most likely to be consulted, while alternatives, even those that are true, are likely to be met with cognitive dissonance and dismissal. Thus, a campaign presented as a righteous popular cause that uses deliberately misleading and false propaganda intended to cause trans folks harm will get support and promotion from members of this group, regardless of the truth or harmful consequences. In short, members of this group cannot be relied on to do what is right. Countering such campaigns and the constant stream of anti-trans rhetoric requires the transgender community to be constantly putting out its own coordinated, clear, concise, on-point messaging through media relations and lobbying that educates, justifies, and counters misinformation. And the sorts of messages that need pushing are that pronouns and bathrooms are not trans folks' main issues, that being trans is not an ideology, but a natural neurobiological condition that is hugely difficult to live and deal with, that their decisions and actions impact real lives and people with genuine and serious issues, and that there is currently a campaign that, in the words of those running it, wants to eradicate trans folks from existence, and that is promoting false and dangerous propaganda about trans folks. This campaign is studied in detail in another video, but it has had an impact, among others, on the abuse and violence routinely experienced by trans folks that results from the lack of understanding and accepting of the condition within society. In a society that promotes false and oversimplified views about nature and biology, encourages and promotes tribalism and the demonization of target minorities, transgender folks are inevitably the focus for a lot of hate, abuse and violence, which can come from those close to a trans individual as much as it can from wider society. This is because those who are close have the most invested in someone who comes out, and therefore the most to lose. This is especially true of a partner where basic needs are no longer likely to be met. As a result, rejection, gaslighting and domestic abuse are commonplace, with a partner or close relation taking out their anger, disappointment and fear on the trans individual, despite them often being at a point where they need love and support more than ever. As for the wider environs, verbal abuse is commonplace, especially from those who believe they know how the world should be, while bullying is almost universal, as trans folks stand out from the rest. This often starts at school before they even realise they are trans. They also experience above average levels of physical and sexual violence, made all the worse by access to essential support services being blocked by anti-trans campaigners. Finally, trans folks, especially trans women, are more often the victims of murder than is normal. In one recent case, a group of men dragged a trans woman from her house in South America and filmed her pleading for her life before beating her to death. They then posted the video on social media, where it stayed sufficiently long to go viral. While this was a repulsive and brutal murder, made all the worse by being filmed and posted on social media, worse still were the comments then made in these posts, which repeatedly praised the men for killing a trans woman. It is therefore hardly surprising the statistics for hate, abuse and violence are as they are, and have been growing since the anti-trans campaign started a few years ago. However, they also show that much goes unreported, as victims are often too scared to come forward, or because they know that little is likely to be done. While one must accept that there will always be a small number of people who will target trans folks, the current per capita levels of hate, abuse and violence experienced by trans folks are extreme. This includes domestic violence and abuse, which is very common, while all of this is on top of any abuse, violence related to other characteristics, such as race, sexuality, or sex and misogyny. Little is being done to address this, and in fact, some in authority are actually promoting this behaviour. In short, while there is much rhetoric around trans folks being a danger to society, it is in fact the other way round, and society is a serious danger to trans folks. Finally, we need to take a look at the trans community itself. Now, trans folks exist across the complete spectrum of humanity, and so are very diverse. Generally, their understanding of the biology, law, official processes, medical practices and so on relating to their condition is barely any better than anyone else's. And learning what is needed to deal with the condition is challenging, time-consuming and rarely complete. Understanding and responding to the social issues, and especially anti-trans campaigns on top of this, adds considerably to the challenge, especially when one is already dealing with the issues that are a consequence of the condition. It is hardly surprising that many struggle with this. But this is not something that can be addressed individually. It requires group organisation and action. There are, of course, many diverse and varied groups and organisations that aim to support and advocate for the trans community. Some are local trans social and support groups and are not geared to address the wider social issues. There are a good number who provide support for T within an LGBTQI support umbrella, but many of these do not appreciate the specific additional challenges trans folks face over and above those who are LGB, and their approach and messages can therefore be off-point and unhelpful. Then there are also a lot of folks and organisations doing specific things like trans awareness training and mental health support. However, with no defined standards, what is provided can vary considerably and can often be poor and inappropriate. There are also a number of individuals and small organisations that are, to varying degrees, more focused on different aspects of trans advocacy. But this multiplicity and fragmentation makes common consensus, cohesion, continuity and clarity of purpose difficult to achieve. This is made all the harder by the community being resource poor. Many in the community struggle financially and have to carry significant costs while dealing with their condition, while they are often time limited as they deal with their condition whilst keeping their lives going. The result is there are many in the community willing to express an ill-informed opinion or make misplaced criticism, especially of those who are actually doing good stuff, but considerably less willing to help with the hard but necessary graft of doing, such as things like repeated lobbying. This can be extremely off-putting for those who are working to address the issues. As it is, the community is largely transient. You deal with your condition, then get on with your life. Remaining active in the community can hold you back from this. The confusion, negativity, and criticism simply hastens that departure. This lack of understanding, fragmentation, and discord also makes the community a soft target for any anti-trans campaign, who can easily pick off those who pose a threat to the campaign, keep the community in turmoil by constantly changing the point of attack, and set traps that turn predictable responses back against the community. A protest refamed in the media as dangerous trans activism. And finally, this presents challenges to allies who might provide potentially important support. Fragmentation makes building solid relationships and focusing support difficult, while they too can be lured unawares into costly traps, such as court cases that ultimately force them to lessen their support. So what needs doing? Well, here are some ideas to consider. Firstly, the community needs common, consistent and correct education in the nature of their condition, its effects and treatment, the laws and processes, the issues that it faces, including campaigns against it. Secondly, there needs to be growing coordination between and consolidation of groups and individuals to provide a clear focus for the community. Thirdly, these groups need to develop and implement clear common strategies and tactics to address the issues, developed with the help of experts in the relevant fields that can be brought into by the community. These need to include professional media relations and political lobbying, with clear, accurate and on-point messaging, as well as in identification, education and direction of key allies, and the setting of standards and accreditation for areas such as training. Finally, this needs those in the community to take part as directed in activities such as regular lobbying, as well as financially supporting these groups as best they can, and to be positive rather than critical. Trans folks have always had to fight for understanding, acceptance and appropriate treatment. However, anti-trans campaigns such as the current one pose a real existential threat. The community cannot expect others to fight for them. They need to lead the way and only then look for support from others. And that means focusing on those against them, developing proper understanding, being smart and acting with positivity and cohesion. Now, this is not in any way denigrating the significant efforts put in by many people in the community. It merely raises the need for an in-depth common understanding of the current social acceptance challenges and of the sophistication of the anti-trans campaign, and some openness over what needs doing to deliver a successful counter-campaign. After all, the community does have a very strong hand and winning hand, but does need to play this effectively. So in conclusion, there are a number of significant issues trans folks faced, foremost amongst these being issues related to social acceptance and understanding. These are experienced from across all parts of society and are really the result of considerable ignorance about the condition, its nature, consequences, treatment, law and issues. Essential, therefore, is the need to provide quality education across society about the true nature and consequences of the condition, with clear, simple messaging, because at the moment those in the trans community often experience rejection, denial from those who support their need the most, those closest to them, are finding getting the treatments, rights and acceptance they need difficult, and indeed that these are being eroded by decision makers in key places who are being influenced by propaganda, misinformation, lobbying and media, and are experiencing a rise in ideologically driven transphobic abuse and violence, though this has long been commonplace. And poor understanding about being trans, its nature, consequences, treatment, laws and so on, extends into the transgender community itself, which is diverse, fragmented, resource poor and transient. Common consensus, cohesion, continuity and clarity of purpose continues, therefore, to be difficult to achieve. This has provided a perfect environment for those with extreme political and religious ideologies who don't accept being trans as natural but claim it is a learnt ideology to mount a campaign aimed at eradicating trans folks and their supposed falsehoods from society, and which has been difficult for the trans community to counter. However, while practiced and proven, such campaigns are based on false premises and so can be undermined and countered. And it is down to the trans community itself, first and foremost, to achieve this, to come together and put together smart strategies and associated tactics that they lead the way in undertaking. It is only through doing this that they will build the necessary understanding and support from those in important positions and the rest of the general public that will overcome those targeting trans folk and provide long-term acceptance and security. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it gave you some better understanding of the significant social acceptance and understanding issues transgender folks face. If you'd like to learn more, please do look out for the other videos in this series.